In almost every city, the supermarket is synonymous with routine. Wide aisles, background music, cash registers, and the flow of gondolas where cereals, dairy, meats, and vegetables coexist. On the urban periphery, diverse formats appear: bright hypermarkets, quick-stop neighborhood stores, local brands, and multinational chains. Everyday consumption needs predictable, clean, and safe spaces. However, in the history of these places, there are also episodes that break normality: hasty closures, impossible stenches, late discoveries, and tragedies that leave open questions. This is a portrait of 4 scenes where logistics failed, procedures fell short, and the ordinary became unforgettable. 1. Fort Worth, Texas. The premises that accumulated stench. In the Texas city of Fort Worth on Hemphill Street, a small supermarket changed names several times. Today, it looks discreet: a rectangle of about 3,500 square meters, an auto parts business next door, 2 or 3 cars in the parking lot. At first glance, nothing announces what happened there at the end of the 20th century. Rewind to 1997. A group of investors rents the premises, paints facades with bright colors, and opens a market oriented to a Latin clientele. The financial bet is big, close to $1 million in credit at a time not very indulgent with commercial debt. Over the following months, the store tries to compete with larger centers that combine groceries with clothing, toy stores, cinemas, and restaurants. Reality doesn't cooperate. In 1998, sales don't take off. At the beginning of 1999, payments and interest suffocate cash flow. In July, the order arrives: pull down the shutters and hand over the keys to the bankruptcy administrator. There, the first crack settles in. The closure instructs turning everything off. The store is left dark and silent, but not empty. In cases and showcases remain meats, dairy, fruits, vegetables, and prepared foods. Outside, the Texas summer intensifies the heat. Inside, the closed temperature becomes an incubator. What was perishable inventory turns into a breeding broth. Days later, the surrounding area begins to perceive an odor that is not an odor. It is a presence. Reports arrive in October 1999. The stench slips in with the wind, invades nearby houses, runs through the nearby university campus. Flies, larvae, rodents, and even scavengers circle overhead. The origin is soon traced: the closed store. Health authorities assess the scene. It is not possible to enter without protection. The floor is covered by dark leachates, the product of massive decomposition. The atmosphere contains dangerous concentrations of bacteria typical of spoiled foods. Opening, walking, breathing becomes a risk. A biohazard waste handling operation is coordinated. Hermetic suits, respirators, decontamination upon exit, equipment to remove and bag tons of degraded product. There are no shortcuts. Demolishing blindly would release more agents into the air. The process extends for weeks. Everything that had contact with the fluids is removed. Only some metal equipment is salvaged after exhaustive treatments. Even so, the residual smell lingers for months in the neighborhood's memory. That episode inaugurates a difficult streak for the location. In the following years, different signs try their luck. Some last months, others barely a year. The building seems to accumulate a bad reputation that doesn't show up in balance sheets, but weighs on purchasing decisions. People remember. The stench becomes part of the place's memory. 2. Council Bluffs, Iowa, 10 years behind a refrigerator. In another latitude of the retail map, a medium-format supermarket operates uninterrupted for years. In November 2009, a young employee, under medical treatment for a mental health condition, returns home agitated after a shift. Morning comes, he leaves in light clothing, without car keys, without enough coat for the late November cold. There is no news that day or the next. The family reports the disappearance. Routes are checked, colleagues are consulted, notices are posted. The store keeps running. Days become weeks, weeks become months, and the case slides toward the file of the unresolved. In 2016, that store closes. The building is left empty, like so many others that don't survive consumption changes and digital competition. 3 years later, in 2019, a crew arrives to remove equipment and adapt the space for a new use. In the stockroom remains a gigantic industrial refrigerator with a gap of about 45 centimeters between its metal back and the wall. The maneuver to move it requires a crane and hooks. When the unit separates from the wall, an immobile silhouette appears, a mummified body wedged into the rear service corridor where fans and coils operate. Surprise gives way to identification. The coroner estimates time and sex. The police cross data with old disappearances and summon former workers. Several remember a persistent smell from years earlier, attributed then to internal spills from the equipment. They also remember a habit, climbing up to rest on the flat top of the refrigerator during hours with little clientele. The most solid hypothesis reconstructs a silent accident. A fall from above into the rear gap, a space too narrow to stand up, a rigid trap where the arms are blocked, the constant noise of the motor preventing any possible shout from reaching anyone's ears. With no signs of violence, without injuries compatible with attack, the finding speaks of lethal entrapment and death by a combination of positional asphyxia, dehydration, and hypothermia or collapse. The invisible clock marked between 3 and 4 days of agony. The store operated for a decade with a missing person at the back of the cold. The scene leaves inevitable questions about protocols, maintenance logs, inspections of technical spaces, systematic reporting of anomalous odors. In the daily life of a business, time presses and minor incidents get immediate fixes. But some equipment smells don't come from the equipment. 3. Lancaster, California. The body in the column. In a shopping center in the California desert, the main entrance of a high-traffic store features columns clad in brick. They are hollow elements designed to support canopies and hide installations. On a hot Saturday in August 2018, the shift manager receives complaints of an unpleasant smell at the threshold. The area is cleaned, the smell returns. A plumber examines the base of a column and removes a few bricks. A leg with shoe appears. The perimeter is secured, firefighters and police arrive, the cladding is broken, and a body in advanced decomposition is extracted. The investigation follows the trail to the rooftop. There is access to a space under the cover and, from there, an opening that communicates with the interior of the column. The posture of the body suggests the person entered from above and became wedged with shoulders jammed, one hand behind the head and the other without traction capacity. It is not a duct designed for passage. It is a structural void. The likely death, asphyxia, dehydration, and heat accumulated under the stone. The timing, several days. Days before the discovery, a police report described a man fleeing after a vehicle incident. A witness claimed to have seen him running toward the complex's rooftop. There was no arrest. The initial hypothesis connects both events. In flight, the man would have sought to hide inside the technical space and became trapped. In later months, parallel complaints emerged that pointed to another, bitterer version, in which officers would have contributed to the immobilization. That line, controversial and unresolved in the public record, stayed in the realm of accusations. What was documented is the blind spot. Less than 2 meters from customer traffic, a hollow column housed a corpse that only betrayed itself when fluids found a crack to escape. The image of an automatic door that opens onto a climate-controlled space contrasts with microscopic reality, porous materials, service cavities, nooks invisible to daily operation. There, preventive maintenance and inspection routes make the difference between a safe building and a building that accumulates surprises. 4. Halifax, Nova Scotia. The oven and the morning. On Canada's Atlantic coast, a large department store includes among its services a bakery with deck ovens, heavy doors, and safety controls. In October 2024, daily operations are cut short by a tragedy. A teenage worker does not appear at the end of the shift. The internal search leads to the oven area. There is a smell different from that of fresh bread. The equipment is stopped. The discovery confirms what no one considers possible. The investigation centers on the oven's safety, opening systems from inside, return hinges, interlocks, levers. Employees from other branches publicly show how robust those mechanisms are. The door does not close by itself. The latch requires intention. The store closes for months, removes equipment, undergoes review. The community accompanies the mourning of a migrant family that sought a better life and found the unacceptable. Beyond the forensic conclusions, an emotional trail remains that is not documented in reports. Co-workers who no longer cross the same door with the same mind, a neighborhood that associates a smell with a piece of news, a discreet plaque in homage, a mother who never looks at an oven again without remembering. Between routine and risk, what is not seen from the cart. The 4 cases share a common denominator: the blurred border between a shopping space that seems controlled and the complex reality of its infrastructure. A supermarket is not only aisles, it is a thermal, electrical, and sanitary machine in continuous operation. There are cold rooms, technical voids, hollow columns, false ceilings, machine rooms, and emergency roads. When supervision is interrupted by bankruptcy, by abandonment, by routine that normalizes signals, the invisible elements become protagonists. In Fort Worth, the error was systemic, turning everything off without clearing perishables or planning the safe removal of waste. In Council Bluffs, the accident hid in an area of everyday use where an informal practice, resting on a piece of equipment, opened the door to a lethal scenario. In Lancaster, an architectural void, created to conceal installations, became a deadly trap during a chase. In Halifax, equipment designed with safety redundancies did not prevent a death that defies the intuition of those who operate ovens daily. These stories do not seek morbidity, but understanding. Behind every tragedy, there are processes to be reviewed: checklists when closing a store, post-closure sanitation protocols, confined space inspection, documented maintenance routes, a safety culture that turns casual observation, "It smells odd," "That space sounds off," into concrete action. In retail, safety is not an accessory cost. It is the condition of possibility for routine. The average consumer rarely imagines these angles when choosing a cereal brand or comparing detergent prices. That does not mean living in fear, but that the normality taken for granted rests on complex gears. When those gears fail, due to financial pressure, omission, haste, or chance, the supermarket ceases to be urban decor and becomes a story of odors that invade neighborhoods, of machines that hide silences, of columns that keep secrets, and of ovens that should never close on anyone. The geography of these scenes is broad: Texas, Iowa, California, Nova Scotia. But the lesson is common. No everyday space is immune to the improbable. Prevention does not feed on fear, but on procedures. The memory of communities is also an input. In Fort Worth, the stench defined a place. In Iowa, absence had a closing date years later. In California, the main entrance unknowingly guarded a week of decomposition. In Halifax, bread stopped smelling like bread. Every shopping cart that advances through a lit aisle is a promise of normality. To sustain it, one must look at what is not seen: coolers turned off with products inside, technical voids, equipment that should never become improvised beds, rooftop accesses that cannot be hideouts, doors that cannot trap. What seems obvious after disaster must be routine before it happens. Daily life will continue. Registers opening, offers changing, aisles restocked. But in the city's background, some premises carry stories that don't appear in brochures. There, on that border between consumption and care, these 4 cases remind that safety is not a slogan, but sustained attention to what lies behind the wall, beneath the equipment, above the canopy, or inside the oven. Where the public sees shelves, there are decisions. Where the sense of smell perceives something strange, there is an opportunity to stop a chain of events. And where an automatic door opens every day, it is worth remembering that normality sometimes needs to be reviewed.